doing a collaborative interview with
Where are you? Are you in McComb?
I'm in McComb.
Oh, okay.
And we will, this interview will be on the internet at a website called tellingstories.org fairly soon. Doesn't take Howard very long to get it up, okay? So we just want to make sure that you know that we are here to record this conversation with you with the intention of publishing it as a part of Macomb School District's Oral History Project in collaboration with the Urban School of San Francisco. We are recording video of this interview and intend to publish this on the Student Oral History website, tellingstories.org, as well as on a future Macomb History website, along with a written transcript. This means that your story will be available once published to anyone via the internet. If you agree, please say your name, today's date, and if you agree to allow us to publish your story.
My name is Marion Barry. Today is March 24th, 2011, and you have my permission.
Wonderful. We thank you very much.
My voice holds from talking, I guess, this
Okay,
morning.
and then we're going to give it over to these young ladies, okay?
Who starts?
My name is Venetia Ware.
I'm Maylee Isaacson.
I'm Emma Strebel.
And my name is Anissa Johns. Today is March 24th, 2011. We are at Jackson State University conducting an interview of Mr. Marion Barry. This interview is being conducted by Macomb High School and the Urban School of San Francisco.
Thank you.
So what is your earliest memory
Of what?
as a child of anything?
Oh, my God. I was born in the Delta of Mississippi, in a town called Yadabina, about 15 miles from Greenwood, about 35 miles from Greenville, about 10 or 15 miles from Indianola, where B.B. King grew up. My mother and father were sharecroppers. That means that they bought the cotton seeds from some white man, planted the seeds, harvested the cotton, plowed the fields, and on the side we had a garden and had pigs, hogs, and chicken, in terms of survival. Everything in the town was owned by white people. Usually the same white man. The grocery store, the little clothing store, the gas station. So we never had a car when I was growing up, so it didn't matter. And everything. And looking back upon it, I'm sure that the white man sold the seeds, the cotton seeds, higher than what he paid for them, and bought the cotton lower than he sold it for, which was exploitation at its highest. And I remember just growing up, my mother used to, what we call drag me on a cotton sack. Cotton sack's about this length here, a little bit longer than this. And she's picking cotton in both rows, and I'm on the end of a cotton sack. We had no babysitters. She had to work, so she took me to the fields with her. We lived long distance from anybody else. I had two sisters, one year, 9 months younger, 3 years younger, two of them. But my youngest sister, oldest sister, had gone to Chicago, so for 3 years, I was by myself in the house. We didn't have any any indoor plumbing, didn't have any lights. We had to use kerosene lamps, didn't have any indoor water, didn't have any bathrooms, had to use the outhouse, and had a tin roof on the house, and it was like a little shotgun house. And I remember just playing by myself till I got school age, when I had some friend way down the road somewhere. We used to walk down the road. And one of our favorite sports was going up to the highway, watching the Greyhound go by on his way to Chicago. And I went to a one-room school with about 40 or 50 students in it, segregated. one teacher teaching 40 kids. And that wasn't good memories. I just don't remember learning very, very much because she couldn't get around to us with 40, 50 kids in the class. The teacher never visited my house. I don't think he visited anybody. First of all, it was long distance between all these kids. And a lot of the kids had to walk to school. They didn't have any school buses. Had school buses for white people, but not for black people. We had to walk and walk and walk. Some of them had to get their parents to drop them off in a mule and wagon because there were very few cars there. And then I went to Memphis.
Can you give a brief timeline from where you were born and then all the way up to when you got to McComb,
Just one quick
Mississippi?
interruption is, you're used to being interviewed by people. We want you to have a conversation with these 4 young children.
Okay.
These 4 young kids.
All right.
And so you can ignore we're a fishbowl, ignore the camera. We want you to really connect with
All
these
right.
4 folks, okay?
Should have told me that at first.
Sure.
You've been around a long time. You know, I'm used to looking at the camera.
Did the when you and your sisters went to the highway to watch the Greyhound bus go by, did that symbolize something to you all?
Well, you know, I heard, even when I was young, that a lot of black people were going to Chicago. My grandmother lived in Chicago, and I heard that the Greyhound bus went to Memphis, from Memphis to Chicago. And that we probably did. At the time, thinking about it, you know, as I think about it, it's probably we wish we were on that bus, getting the hell out of there, you know. Yeah.
Can you give a brief timeline of where you were born and then all the way up to when you got to McComb, Mississippi?
Well, I was born in 1936, so 15, 25, 20, 25. At McComb, 1961. So that's 25 years.
But how did you get to McComb? What brought you there?
Well, I was working in the civil rights movement with SNCC. In fact, I was one of the founders of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in April 1960. And James Foreman was our executive director. And I was in graduate school in the fall and spring at the University of Tennessee, working on my PhD in chemistry. And each summer, from 61 going on to 64, I worked in the summer in the movement in the South, trying to register people to vote. And Bob Moses had been to McComb, Mississippi. He had been up in Cleveland with Amazon Moore, and SNCC developed a project in McComb, Mississippi. And we had a division in SNCC between direct action and voter registration. But we decided those who wanted to do direct action, do that. Those who wanted to do voter registration, do that. We were all field secretaries for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And James Foreman said, during your summer, go to McComb. And I stopped in Greenwood first. That's where we had a major project. And that took the bus with Reggie Robinson, who was another field secretary who's now in Washington, D.C. We went to McComb. The local people had made arrangements. We had this philosophy in SNCC of living with the local people, not living in hotels, not living in motels, but living with the people. Because if you live with the people will protect you. I can't remember the lady's name. Her first name was Mama somebody. It's been so long. We moved in. He and I slept in the same room. And we then started organizing. We were very good at organizing. We knew where to start. Going out talking to people. And it had just happened. It happened about a week or two after Herbert Lee had gotten killed on the courthouse steps of Pike County. So that gave us an organizing tool, to protest the killing of Herbert Lee. And it's easy to organize around death and injustice. So we started doing that. Started having mass meetings in McComb, above the Bergland supermarket. That was a Masonic temple. We usually have our mass meetings in churches, but I can't recall why we didn't have it in a church in McComb. Might have been the ministers too scared, I don't know. But we went to the Masonic Temple, which is a black organization. That's how I got to McComb, Mississippi.
And when you arrived in McComb, what was the racial situation like? How did they receive you?
Oh, they said, oh, the freedom fighters, the freedom riders are coming. That's what we were called. Freedom riders are coming. You know, like Paul Revere warning the pound about the British coming. Freedom riders are coming. We were welcomed. Now, of course, there was some black people scared to death because white folks made them think they ought to be scared. And we were greeted warmly. And as I said, we lived in the community. So during the day, I'm walking in the community, talking to people, organizing people, getting in. We had an old raggedy car that we drove out in the backwoods. Mr. Steptoe and others lived outside of the city. Now, we were greeted warmly. And we had a local place called a little hole in the wall where they served beer and barbecue and et cetera. So after every mass meeting, we walked down there and sat and talked about these events, about strategy for tomorrow. See, the movement was well organized. It wasn't a happenstance. You just go sit in without a plan of action. And so we were very well received by the people in McComb, Mississippi. As I said, some of them were scared, no question about it. I understand why some of them were scared, because a lot of them depended on white people for their livelihood. And white people would fire you if you mess with them freedom riders, you know. But most of the people were farmers, independent from that. You had a number of people in McComb who worked for the school system. They were half scared, but they at least didn't say anything negative about us. And all the black leadership, the most encouraging people were black preachers. The black preachers, independent of anybody, independent on white folks for their money, independent on white folks for anything. They didn't depend on white folks for their gospel, for their God, and none of that stuff, you know. And so the black preachers were there. Not all of them, but enough. We go on Sundays. We go to divide up, go to these various churches, talk about the movement. You know, we're gonna march tomorrow on Monday. Everybody be there at 10 o'clock, kind of thing. Or when students walked out, we had a rally that same night. The place was full, packed with people and supporting the students. So that happened all over. It happened up in Roosevelt with Miss Hamer. You know, people were, you know, they were not well educated in terms of our standard of education. Many of them had not finished high school. Like my mother went to the 3rd grade, father the 4th grade. Couldn't get out and chop cotton and pick cotton. Or down in that part of Mississippi, they did a lot of woods, a lot of wood cutting. Had to go to work for survival.
Now, by you coming to McComb, how did it affect you personally? Coming in, seeing the things that's going on, you know, working on it hands-on. How did it affect you personally, coming here with the people that you stayed with? How did it affect you personally? How did it change you as a person?
Well, I grew up in a urban city called Memphis, Tennessee. And I went to school. I went to Fisk University in Nashville, another urban city. And there was poverty, but you know, you didn't see it the same way. I grew up very, very poor. And I had been in and out of the rural South during the summer of 60, sitting in, etc. But I had not been to the deep, deep rural South. Even though I was born in the deep, deep rural South. You know, I was 8 years old when I left there. And so coming to McComb I was excited about it. It was a challenge, though. I didn't know how we would find the people. I suspected that they would be receptive. And I talked to people who had been there before. But the beauty of coming to McComb, Mississippi, was about a week or two after I got there. I met Curtis. His name was Curtis Hayes then, and Hollis Watkins. And they were just a breath of fresh air. They must have been 18, 19 years of age. And they were with us every day, learning what we were learning, how to organize people, how to get people motivated. Hollis started singing freedom songs, and et cetera. And they gave me, but I already had insight up here in my head, you know, about the conditions. But you don't understand the conditions until you really are in the conditions and seeing people live the way they do. I had the same feeling. I went to South Africa, and I went to Soweto to see the conditions of the people there. And I was a strong supporter of the ANCs, but you never get it until you get it right up here, right in your front door. We got to live it. You got to live it. You know, and you got to see the hurt, see the pain, see the tiredness on the part of those farmers who've been farming for 40 years and still farming, not making much money. To see those woodcutters down in that area of Mississippi, logging, cutting somebody else's logs as opposed to their own logs. You know, so it didn't change me as much. It gave me more insight, and it moved me in my heart stronger, made me more committed to do what I had to do, because there was pain and suffering and injustices going on. But because Herbert Lee had been killed, it gave us something to organize around. So usually in every movement, you have to have something to organize around. You can't organize around nothing. And during the 60s, we organized around the lunch counters, sitting in. We organized around the libraries, the swimming pools, the other segregated situations. And so in Mississippi, we organized around that as well as the right to vote. I mean, we registered votes. I mean, Herbert Lee got killed trying to register to vote in America. Got killed doing that. And not only did he get killed, he got acquitted, not hung jury, acquitted by 12 white men, which started breaking up that all-white jury system, which was wrong. So out of that McComb experience came so many other good things that happened. You know, Brenda Travis, who he emerged. She was a sophomore at, what was the name of the school at that time? Bergland High School. And to lead, I was 16, 17, to lead a movement of students out of the school, and the students rallied. You know, they didn't know anything about the civil rights movement. They didn't know anything about what white folks call that mess over there. They didn't, but they got it. They caught on to it. I don't know how you all feel about all that now. I suspect I know. But in the absence of our history, there's no way to feel that you ought to be free. Because if you don't know where you came from, you may not know where you go. You may go anywhere. You know, go anywhere. All roads lead to nowhere.
Okay, I want to take you back a little bit and ask you what event occurred in your life personally that encouraged you to join SNCC.
You know, I asked myself that question. In Memphis, there was not a major movement. There was the NAACP, but they were mostly legal. I went to a high school, an athletic high school. There were no movements or anything there. Went to college. I guess God was moving. When I got to college, I got very active in student government and et cetera. I suspect that one of the things that propelled me into the movement was in 1958, I was a senior at Lemoyne College, African American college, HBU, and first black president. We had a member of the board of directors was white, named Chandler, Walter Chandler. His father had been mayor, grandfather had been mayor, he had been mayor. So to get him on the board of directors was good for the college because he helped raise some money for Lemoyne College. But he also was a lawyer for the city. And the NAACP sued the city because the buses were segregated. We had to sit in the back. If we get to a part of town, we start filling with white people. You had to get up from your seat and go to the back. Not as bad as New Orleans when they had a little sign they put there, black people back here, white people up here. And he said some negative things about black folks in his argument to the court. You treat Negroes, that's how he said it, Negroes, like little brothers, just condescending. And I was president of the Lemoyne chapter of the NAACP. And I decided to write a letter to the president complaining about that, saying that Walter Chandler either apologize to the students or resign, that he's doesn't represent the best that there is to represent. And talking about it on a black college board of directors, going to talk about that, talk to us like that. I wasn't going to take it. Don't take it. We had a newspaper, little mimeograph newspaper, that came out on a Friday called The Magician. I wrote a letter on Thursday morning, sent it over to the president. I took it over to the president and put it in his box in his home. And so a friend of mine who was the editor of The Magician said, why don't you put this in the paper? That's all right. It ran in the paper, front page, Magician. Barry asked Chandler, resign or apology. We have a paper called the Memphis Commercial Appeal, the morning paper. That Saturday morning, it was the front page of the paper. You imagine this black man, how dare him talking about Chandler ought to resign or apologize, the former mayor of Memphis, Tennessee. And I had to talk all over to our front page. That Monday, the president called me in. He said, Mr. Barry, you're an embarrassment to the college. Black man. Embarrassment. I said, I'm not an embarrassment. He's an embarrassment, not me. He said, I think I'm going to have to dismiss you. I'm a senior now, about 3 weeks from graduating. I said, no, you're not dismissing me. I said, we're going to close the college down. Do that. Went back and got 9 or 10 students in the committee and said, what happened? They said, all right. So we started putting out leaflets. Let's close it down. Let's close it down. If Chandler doesn't apologize, I doesn't resign. It really reminds me of some of the movements in the Middle East now, with demanding the resignation of the president. Except this time, they're demanding the resignation of Walter Chandler. I hadn't thought about that in a long time, but if there's any one event that started me in this movement, it was that. And also, I guess God I had no role models around me. Nobody was protesting. Nobody was raising hell. People were accepting that segregated situation because white people had conditioned us to accept that. The slave master tried to condition the slaves to accept slavery. So it was much more difficult because of all the hard work you had to do. But we had been conditioned, like you have been conditioned, to accept certain things in the society. Unless somebody intervenes to say, well, that's not right, to accept, you accept it. That's why education is so important. Knowledge of ourself, knowledge of our history, knowledge of the struggle, knowledge of the people who fought a long time before we were even born has to be in our head. And so that was the first event. And then I went to that same spring, I went to Fisk University in the fall, working on my master's degree. And in the fall of 1959, a minister by the name of James Lawson, who was the first African-American student at Vanderbilt Divinity School, came over to Fisk. There was Diane Nash, myself, Angela Butler, and then John Lewis, who now is a congressman, James Bevel, and Bernard Lafayette was at a divinity school called American Baptist Seminary. He brought them over together, a few students from Tennessee State, our state university, and started nonviolent direct training, teaching us how to sit in, get hit, and all got hit. And then on February the 1st, 4 brave, courageous A&T students decided to sit at the lunch counter, sparked the movement. That next Saturday, about 300 of us went downtown, got arrested. And when I was growing up, my mother said, if you ever get arrested, unless you done something bad. Also, I didn't grow up in a nonviolent situation. We weren't shooting and killing each other like they're doing now. We used to, fight a lot. Among friends we fight. And finish writing and go and be friends. And we got out on that Monday. And Dr. King was scheduled to come to Fisk anyway, that Monday night. He came. He congratulated us, urged us to keep on fighting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then after the mass meeting, he had about a dozen of us for about 2 hours just talking about nonviolence and helping us to understand the Montgomery bus boycott that I read about, understand the struggle that we're in as a people. And that sort of got me propelled. And in 60, I was graduating in 60. I went to the University of Tennessee, and I went to the University of Kansas for a year. Hated it out in Kansas. Then I transferred to the University of Tennessee in 61 and started working there. And that's when I left the University of Tennessee in 61, that summer, went to McComb. That's a long story around to McComb. But a good story.
It is.
Can you tell us about your strongest memory of racial injustices?
Oh,
in
God,
Macomb or anywhere
there's so
else?
many. I mean, everywhere you went, everywhere you went. Growing up in Memphis, I walked past recreation centers. I lived on the street. The street was all black. The perpendicular streets were all white, going that way. Right? There was 3rd Street, which was a business corridor coming into Mississippi. And then on that side was all black. And so I carried the newspapers both morning and evening. And about 40% of my customers were white people. I had to collect money from them. So I faced it, passed by all white swimming pool. I faced it in a rather personal way. I lived in a neighborhood where there were some white boys that had papers too. We knew each other. And there was a site that later became the first Holiday Inn in America, big old ball field. I don't know who initiated it, but every Thanksgiving we had what we call the Blood Bowl, because you didn't play with any kind of tackles or any kind of kidney pads or any clicks, or nothing. Just boots and yourself. That's why we call it the Blood Bowl, because you get your teeth kicked out and all that kind of stuff. The white boys would play the black boys. Obviously, we kicked their ass, all the time. Then we mix it up, white and black, like that. And the first time we did that, the cops came up there, want to break it up. We said, no, and the white boys said, no, you're not breaking this up. We're having fun. And they didn't do it. we played in that game, I guess, for 3 or 4 years till I left. But everywhere I went, if I had to go to the Memphis Zoo, our day was Thursday. And if Thursday fell on a holiday, like Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year sometime, we couldn't go. We couldn't go. We couldn't try on clothes at Goldsmith, downtown, Memphis. Couldn't try on a hat. Couldn't try on a jacket or a suit. We just take it home and couldn't bring it back. The restroom, segregated. When I was carrying papers, there was a restaurant at the corner of 3rd and E.H. Crump Boulevard in Memphis. I couldn't go in to get a cup of coffee. I had to go to the back, get a cup of coffee. I wanted to go to the bathroom. They didn't even have a colored bathroom there because black people had no business being in there. I don't know where the cooks went. I guess they went somewhere. And at the gas station, we call them service stations then, next door, they had a colored and white bathroom. That is the height of indignity. You know, you pay your money for the same gas, but got to go to separate bathrooms. I could just name so many of them, you know. Just I tell you a real big one for me. At the Memphis Commercial Appeal, had these contests. If you get 15 new customers, promoting customers, you get a prize. For the white boys, the prize was going to New Orleans. For the black boys, until we protested, nothing happened. And just so happened, some of us, you know, I really think that might have been the beginning, not Malone College, because I had a cousin that lived in the Northeast. Somebody else had a cousin that lived over here in South Memphis. We said, we're going to stop carrying the paper. And back in the day, it wasn't computerized. The name was in a little book. Marion Barry, so-and-so, was in a little book. And so we kept our books. For 3 days, they couldn't deliver the paper. They tried to figure out, they could not deliver the paper. Had stacks of paper in the paper house. People complaining, where's my paper? Couldn't deliver the paper. So finally, the top people in the paper met with about a dozen of us. It sort of just spread. You know, we started with maybe half a dozen of us who were doing it, who knew each other. There was still in our house some black people, boys, carried their route. They couldn't carry my route. I had about 75 papers, maybe 125 papers. Other guys had 100 some papers. They met with us. What do you all want? We want to go to New Orleans like everybody else. We're going to New Orleans. Go to New Orleans. Well, you can't do that. Why? Well, even though we leased the bus from Greyhound, they still got segregated laws in the South that we can't carry you on the bus. And I said, unless you sit in the back. I said, no, I'm not sitting in the back of the bus. I'm not doing that. I sort of developing leadership then. But the bottom line is, they said, okay, we'll give the black carriers a trip to St. Louis, which is not segregated. Well, prior to that, I know what they were doing. They were giving us bicycles. Prior to that, bicycles compared to New Orleans, there's no equity in that at all. So we went to St. Louis, and but it's all over. I remember we had a Memphis fair. You know, fairgrounds, all these farmers and rides and all this other kind of thing. Our day was Monday, Wednesday, something like that. And I got a white friend of mine to buy 10 tickets to the fair. We had 2 cars. We went in, and it happened so fast, we gave our tickets, kept walking. Before anybody could say anything. We'd been there about 10 minutes, the cops came. You gotta leave. I said, we got our tickets. We don't give a damn what you got. You're gonna leave this place because you're violating the law. If you don't leave in 3 or 4 minutes, 5 minutes, we're gonna arrest you. We didn't go out there to get arrested. One thing about the movement was rather planned to get arrested. Mm-hmm. So we got organized to follow up on it. And so we left. And there are just so many places. I tell you another one too that was just, made me think about it. Mm-hmm. I used to wait tables when I was in high school. Mm-hmm. I mean, in college. I picked cotton when I was in high school. A place called the Peabody Hotel. One of the biggest hotels in the Southland. Big old chandeliers, etc. Got these ducks that come from the penthouse and march all up in the lobby. The hotel was totally segregated. And so those of us who waited tables at banquets had to go through the alley, go up the freight elevator to the serving room. It was serving banquets. Couldn't get off any floor. Only folks allowed on the floor was black chambermaids. Mm-hmm. Get them damn ducks up there in the penthouse. Can get out and stop on the ground floor, and people take pictures and stuff like that with them. And that's another indignity. We got over on them though. We tell the chef if he's gonna cook 800 steaks, 700 steaks, cook us a few dozen. Mm-hmm. And we took steaks out of them. we were. Then I worked at the American Legion, all white people there, and we had to give you tickets. You buy 5 tickets to buy 5 drinks or 4 drinks. So if you order, we had to deal with the bartender. Mm-hmm. If you ordered 5 drinks, we give him 4 tickets. And we keep the extra ticket. Mm-hmm. We split half and half. And so that we ran game, we made $15, $20 a night running game like that. See, black people have to learn how to survive anyway.
Yeah.
Had to be ingenious to get around white folks' bullshit. And all that kind of stuff. That had to happen. And at the American Legion, the white folks get drunk. Come on. Hey, nigger, come on here. I told one of us, I'm not going to be into them, you know. My name is so-and-so, Mr. Barry. I ain't going to. I get ready to do something. I went to the manager and told the manager, you got to stop him. And so he put him out. About 2 or 3 days later, same thing happened. I quit. I knew I was going to be in jail. I couldn't take that from him.
Going back to the work that you did in SNCC, what exactly did you do?
It depended on where I was. In McComb, I was organizing. In 62, I think we went back to McComb in 62. In 63, I was in school in Knoxville at the University of Tennessee, and I was organizing in Knoxville. Things were segregated all over the place. Started a newspaper called the Knoxville Crusader, and then went to Washington in August 63. In 64, the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party was organizing to try to unseat the all-white Mississippi Democratic Party. And my job was to go around the country, the 2 of us, and try to get state legislators and state parties to vote to unseat the all-white party. We needed so many votes to do that. And I went all over. I went to Chicago, I went to San Francisco, I went to Milwaukee, I went to Washington State, went to Oregon, went to Massachusetts, went to New York, went to all the northern states, Pennsylvania, trying to get these state parties to unseat this all-white delegation. And I went to Atlantic City in '64. We slept on the boardwalk, Atlantic City. Ms. Hamer was our leader, and she wanted to be seated. She appeared before the Credentials Committee. You might have heard some of it last night if you were over were you at Tougaloo last night? You missed it because people gave a history of what Ms. Hamer said. I think there's a book called Hands on the Plow. You ought to get that book. 52 black women talking about their experiences in the movement. You ought to get it. And Hubert Humphrey was running for president at that time. And Johnson was the president, had taken JFK's place. And they wanted to give us 2 seats. We said, hell no. We don't want to do that. And that was the same summer that Swerna Goodman Cheney had been assassinated in Philadelphia. And SNCC had sent out a major mailing to people to support the people in the South. So after I left Atlantic City, Jane Foreman asked me to go to New York, try to get this mail in the bank. We had over $1 million in mail bags and things sitting around in the New York office because nobody could figure out how to get it in the bank. I went up there and got it organized. This is very simple. First of all, open the mail. You know, that's the first thing you do. Just open it. Then you got a system. If there's cash in there, no name, you put the cash in this tray over here, throw the envelope away. If there's an envelope with cash and a name on it, you put it over here so we can send people to thank you. If it's a check with a name and address on the check, you go copy the check and put the check over here. It took me 6 weeks to get $1 million in the bank, which I did. And then in December of '64, Jane Foreman asked me to go to New York. Go to Washington. We had a white director of the Washington office, Jim Mansonas. He said, we need a black director. Washington, majority of black town, students, majority of black students in the South fighting. So go to Washington to lobby for us and to try to raise money. Went to Washington in '65. And I've been there ever since. I've been involved in politics 31 years in Washington. Mayor 16 years, city council, another 16 years, school board president. The movement did all that. The movement propelled me into leadership skill development. The problem with you young people now, you have nothing like the anti-Vietnam War movement. You don't have the civil rights movement to organize. And it's hard to organize what you have to try to organize around now. You can organize against violence, against drugs, and all that stuff, but that's hard to catch on to because it's not universal. Well, this thirst for freedom was universal, even though people didn't come out and act on it sometimes, they felt it in their hearts. So it was easier. Segregation, everybody could feel that, could see it, feel it. Anti-Vietnam War. You could ideologically, you could identify with being against the war. And organize going to Washington. Organizing having protests in your cities, except in the South, is very difficult because people didn't feel it the same way. But now we don't have it. I mean, you ought to tell me what we need to do to organize these young people. What do we need to do?
I mean, we've talked about this before in class, and I just believe that we need more motivation towards the things that needs to be done. I feel we need people like you, somebody that we know that has done something meaningful. We need more motivation to motivate us to do things, to change more things so other people can have motivation from us. We need
someone to look up to.
Yeah, we need,
I think if they're aware of the past and the struggle and everything Black people did to get us to where we are today, they're ignorant to the past. So I think that's another reason why it's hard to grab their attention.
and some people just really don't want to know. They're like, well, this back then doesn't matter now, but what they do not know is it matters. It matters a whole lot. What happened then, it's still happening now, and it's still present to this day. They don't understand that. People are so narrow-minded to the fact that, oh, well, it's back then, it doesn't matter anymore. But it does matter. It matters a lot. What happened then, it matters now. That's what they don't understand. That's what they need to understand. And in order for them to understand it, like she said, they're ignorant. So we need people to motivate us, to motivate them. And I think this class did a whole lot to motivate us and to help us do all this, meeting you and everything else. We need more motivation like this throughout the school, throughout everywhere.
Much more.
Well, I'm really impressed with you all, the questions and the attentiveness you give to this subject. How do you get more students at your school to do more?
I think even though, motivation comes from people like you, I think coming from us, being their age, I think it helps more. I think they understand more coming from us. But, like I said, some people, no matter what they say or what you do, they still, if they don't want to listen, they're not going to listen.
Well, they've been brainwashed. You don't see us in the textbook.
African American studies is out.
That kind of stuff, and sense of our history, so we can feel good and great. And a lot of students are struggling financially. Their mothers and fathers don't have much money, particularly if they're on welfare. They've just got meager amounts of money. They see these Nike shoes, they want some of them too. They see these other kinds, they want some of them too. These name brands.
One parent home.
Yeah, single parent, his household. There are a lot of conditions. I have a 30-year-old son, and he knows about the movement because he grew up with me. After I got to Washington, he was born in 1980. But I talked to him about it. I take him to conferences. But he said, Dad, I know, we admire what you did, but the tactics that you all used back then won't work now. And he's right. He said, Dad, can you imagine y'all going to picket a crack house? You get killed. That's what happened to you. And so the conditions are a lot different. So we got to try to figure out how to deal with the uniqueness of this society right now. How do we get these guns off the streets?
And see, I really don't understand it because back then, us as African Americans, we had rage then, but it's now we have rage, but it's like
turning inside of us.
Right.
Kind of on each other.
It's not. I mean, why do we have rage within ourselves between each other when we shouldn't? You get what I'm saying? Rage, it does a lot. And I think of us now in this decade, we act upon our rage, shooting and all of that. It's not really
But it didn't just start that way. It started with slavery. The goal of the white man, as a slave master, was to keep us divided. The field Negro from the house Negro.
It's still like this.
The big lip Negro from the thin lip. The nappy head from the straight hair. The light skin from the dark skin. It started that way. And so we are now suffering from what I call Akbar. You got to read that book. Akbar talks about psychological slavery. Some of us are still in psychological slavery, even though we remove the physical barriers. The psychological slavery is there. The jealousies are there, the divisions are there. I go to a church, Temple of Praise, where pastor preaches about life living and the kind of life we ought to be living as people first, as Christians, etc. He said, Miss Jones gets a new car. President said, let me figure out how she got it so I can do the same thing, get me a new car. He said, how'd she get that car? She must have been doing something wrong to get that car. Hated already. We got a lot of haters out here. How much more time we got?
We actually should start wrapping it up.
Well, that's
Thank you
good.
so much.
I'm getting tired.
I have
Make sure that there's just, you can ask this question, but I want to make sure that there's any other really nifty nuggets of his experience in McComb.
Anything that's very memorable to you.
Remember my McComb?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, it's been a long time. 61, 39, 49 years. I tell you the experience I had in 1994, the 30-year reunion of the Mississippi Project. I came to Jackson, and I wanted to go to had my son with me and my wife. And I said, I'm going back to McComb. And I went back to McComb, had a black sheriff, which was just a black police chief. And I had 3 of the 5 members of the Board of Commissioners of Pike County was there. And we went to this restaurant owned by white people. Still may be there. They had a big round table. It's sort of like a Chinese table. It's around, served by white people. That was memorable. I mean, just to come back 30 years later and white people serving me and our delegation as opposed to me serving them, etc. There were just so many. I remember going out to Steptoe's farm. Had all the lights out. You had to keep them out. People were shooting in there. So we drove up, blinked out lights and things. Finally came to the door. Who out there? Marion Barry and Johnson. Who out there? So he said, walk slowly now. Walk slowly. Don't come up here too fast. Now he knew me, but it was still kind of real dark. There are no lights on the road. The dark lights getting up in there. So we finally got there. He had a shotgun in his hand, 12 gauge. He said, "Man, you better be careful out here, because I don't know who's up here. These white folks are awfully mean. They may be coming to get me. If they ain't gonna get me, I'm gonna get them first. That's why I keep the lights out. I got the lamp on in the back there. I can see in the house. But that was very memorable to me. Another time I was in McComb and moved down to the little, what we call a little beer garden place down there. And Reggie Robertson, who was my roommate, went in a little bit early. Usually at the end of the mass, when we go down there, we drink beer, eat ribs, and sort of talk about what's going on for the day going forward, strategizing. He came running down the street and said, "Marion Barry, guess what happened?" He said, "Somebody just shot into our house. And the bullet hit where you would have been if you had been there. If you had been there." That was God. That was God. That was God doing that. There were other incidents in McComb, but I just remember the people more than anything else. Just the tenacity to stand up. Not everybody, but enough people did that. But it was the students I remember the most. But revolutions are started by young people. If you study the Cuban Revolution, then other revolutions, that started by young people. SNCC, student movement, started by young people. 4 guys, Ezekiel Blair and others, at the lunch counter. On the other hand, you had Montgomery and Rosa Parks. That was unusual. That you had an older person starting that movement. That's unusual. Because young people are more idealistic. They got more energy, more zeal and zest. They don't have the financial worries that older people have who got children, got mortgages to pay. There's no excuse why you shouldn't be involved. But certainly, if you ain't got to worry about all that, you can just, you can go to jail and you can come out of jail and it's not going to be on your record because it was a civil rights kind of movement. It's just much. Every move, even Mao Zedong in China started a long time ago, before he took over China. And so even the Russian Revolution, even the peasants were the ones who really pushed it. It was the young peasants who pushed against the czars and all that kind of stuff. I tell you, so much the movement did for me. And I hope it does it for you. It taught me about Africa. It taught me about Africa. When I was growing up, long before you all were born, I used to go to the movie and see Tarzan. Y'all ever hear of Tarzan? Mm-hmm. Tarzan and Jane and Cheetah. I thought that's what Africa was about. I thought black folks were eating people up and just savages. Because white people wanted us to think that. Mm-hmm. They wanted to just depict us as savage beasts, etc. And I remember the first time I went to Africa, Senegal, my wife and I. And I got off the plane. I was mayor then. They had all this red carpet, and the vice president of Senegal was there. And when in Africa, they drum you in. They drum you. Had 3 different tribes of drummers. Got off. I walked down the steps. The first thing I did, I just instinctively kissed the ground. Kissed the ground. Glad to be home. Glad to be home. And the other thing it taught me, I went to an island called Goree Island, where it's called the door to last passage. Now the door to nowhere. It's the last place. They had these little things about this tall that you kept the slaves in. You could not stand up the whole time. You could barely lie down when there were other slaves in there, so you had to sort of sleep the best way you could. And you walk off that plank out into the ocean. You would never see it again. And they tell me, and you had a gyro, it's a storyteller. He spoke in French. So you had to have an interpreter tell you. But even with the interpreter telling you the story, you had to cry to know that your ancestors had to endure all of that and go on. And finally they learned where they were going, and some of them wouldn't go. But in terms of McComb, it really was life changing for me.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
for sharing your
Thank you.
story.
Thank you all. Good luck. Keep fighting.
Thank you.
I'm glad you've got this collaborative between San Francisco and McComb.
Yeah, it's great.
Reminds me of Mississippi, when white people and other people came from the north to the south.
This is their first time.
That's great. All right.
Thank you
Well,
very
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really
Wonderful guy.
wonderful.
Really.
Here, let me just unhook you. I'm sending texts back to our school saying we're
Me too.
interviewing you live right now. They're all sending me back notes. We're all so excited.
Have you been sending things to the bulletin
Thank
board?
you.
Really, really appreciate you giving us this
Where
time.
are you from?
I grew up in South Carolina. My husband grew up in McComb.